At Liberty Without Compromise, we've long said that Kootenai County Republican Central Committee's so-called vetting process is a complete joke. It's not transparent, it's not fair, and it's not serving voters. We've seen it firsthand. In early 2024, when Dan went through their process, it was anything but impartial. Committee members openly showed bias, some even attacking him at his own campaign events, while others who sat on the vetting committee were actively campaigning for his opponent, Sheriff Bob Norris. Now, that's not vetting, that is a rigged process. Fast forward to today, and the same corruption is on display. This week, multiple candidates running for local office have publicly stated that they were denied the KCRCC's recommendation, even though their opponents received it. Screenshots from these candidates are circulating on social media as proof. And what's the KCRCC response? They're jumping into comment sections, calling it fake news and claiming it's up to each candidate to chase down the committee and beg for an interview. With the November 4th election right around the corner, the KCRCC has already published its list of recommended candidates. And because so many voters take that card to the polls, their opponents are starting the race at a huge disadvantage. This isn't grassroots representation. This is machine politics controlled by Brent Reagan and a handful of insiders. Tonight, we're exposing exactly how this works and why it matters now more than it ever has. I'll show you the screenshots, the candidate statement, and the proof that the KCRCC is misleading the public and manipulating elections in Kootenai County. Now, here's where it gets even more disturbing. This week, a post from Michaela Charter, the wife of firefighter and fire commissioner candidate Jason Charter, went public. And it confirms everything we've been saying about the KCRCC's broken system. Jason has 18 years of firefighter experience, nearly 35 years as a North Idaho resident, and a lifetime rooted in faith, family, and service. He's running for fire commissioner, and yet, according to Michaela, he never received an invitation from the KCRCC to participate in their so-called vetting process. Neither did most of the other candidates in his race. 2 out of the 3 were excluded entirely. But here's the kicker. The KCRCC didn't just ignore these candidates. They went further, claiming publicly that those candidates chose not to respond. And that's a lie. It's also insulting to the very people who care enough about their community to step up and run for office. Think about that. Men and women with decades of service to this community, people rooted here for their entire lives, are being erased from the process because they're not the chosen ones. Meanwhile, the committee manipulates the narrative, telling voters it's the candidate's fault. As Michaela points out, this isn't about who wins an endorsement, it's about the integrity of the process itself. When groups like the KCRCC say they represent conservative values, but behind closed doors deny candidates even the opportunity to be heard, that's not integrity, that's corruption, and it misleads the very voters that they claim to serve. And here's yet another example, this time from Renee Mullen, a candidate for Rathdrum City Council, seat number 3. Renee explains that she was contacted by the KCRCC and they promised to email her the candidate questionnaire. But here's the problem. They got her email address wrong. By the time they admitted their mistake, it was too late. The endorsements had already gone out. She never got the chance to be vetted. Now think about that. A candidate steps up to run, makes herself available, and loses her shot at the fair consideration because the KCRCC botched her contact information, and instead of making it right, they still went ahead and handed out endorsements. Now, Renee calls it out publicly, and what happens? She's already anticipating Mary White's spin. She chose not to go through the process and that it's the candidate's responsibility to chase down the committee. That is the same blame shifting and gaslighting that we saw just a moment ago. And here's the kicker on this one. While excluding her, the KCRCC is endorsing John Hodgkins in Rathdrum, a candidate with a voting record that includes voting against property rights and even recusing himself from votes altogether. So they block a fresh candidate from even being vetted while propping up someone who's already proven they won't stand firmly for the community. This is the pattern. The KCRCC makes mistakes, excludes candidates, then tells the public it's the candidate's fault. Meanwhile, they funnel their support toward the chosen ones who will toe the line no matter their record. And voters are supposed to trust this process? Absolutely not. Now let's look at how members of the KCRCC are trying to defend this so-called vetting process online. This is Mary White. She's both part of the KCRCC and one of the loudest voices right now running interference when candidates are calling out the failures of their process. Here's what she posted. Now notice what happens here. She doesn't address the actual complaint that candidates were never contacted, never interviewed, never given the opportunity to be vetted. Instead, she leads with, "This is fake news." That's a classic tactic. Discredit the accuser before even responding to the substance. Then she shifts the blame. She says it's the candidate's responsibility to go on the KCRCC website and make sure that they're vetted. In other words, if you weren't interviewed, it's not because the committee failed, it's because you didn't do your homework. That's not accountability, that's blame shifting. Next, she tries to soften the failure by saying they attempt to reach out by email or phone just as a courtesy. Framing it as a courtesy is key. It lowers the expectation that they're actually responsible for ensuring fairness in the process. If they reach out, great. If they don't, oh well, apparently that's the candidate's problem. Finally, look at how she sprinkles in the words like, "We want every candidate to participate," and mentions background checks and interviews. That's meant to create the illusion of rigor and inclusivity, but here's the reality. Multiple candidates are saying publicly they never even got a shot. Those words don't line up with the facts. So what's happening here? It's deflection, gaslighting, and spin. Call it whatever you want, but it's not transparency, it's not integrity, and it's certainly not fair to the voters of Kootenai County. This is how the KCRCC protects their monopoly: deny, deflect, and distract. Meanwhile, candidates who could be excellent public servants are excluded, and the voters are left with a stacked deck. The KCRCC's recommendation card is already out, but after watching this, you've got to ask yourself, what is that card really worth? If voices are silenced, if candidates are ignored, and if endorsements are based on power and money rather than fairness and transparency, then those endorsements mean nothing. The only way forward is for voters to do exactly what Michaela said: do your own research, meet the candidates, and make your decision based on truth, not shortcuts. Because if the KCRCC had their way, you'd never even know that some of the most qualified candidates in our county even exist.